Good day, students. Once again, this is Ma'am Quaj, and welcome to the part 2 of the topics about carbohydrate. In the previous video, we learned about the biochemistry of carbohydrates, and that includes the chemical structure, the properties, the composition, as well as the metabolism of carbohydrates. This time, we will be discussing about the different hormones that are involved in the regulation of carbohydrate metabolism. The liver, pancreas, and other endocrine glands are all involved in controlling the blood glucose concentrations within a narrow range. Now, during a brief fast, the glucose is supplied to the extracellular fluid from the liver, from which the process of glycogenolysis is involved. While during the fasting, when the fasting period is longer than 1 day, of course, the glucose is synthesized from non-carbohydrate sources such as what we have learned in the previous video. These include the amino acids and proteins as well as the lactate. And this process is called as the gluconeogenesis. The gastrointestinal system is composed of the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, and the large intestine. Now, digestion is a process by which complex molecules are degraded into simple constituents or simple molecules so that these will be absorbed and used by the different cells in the body. Now, the pancreas is a large gland that is involved also in the digestive process but is located outside the gastrointestinal that I have mentioned a while ago. And pancreas consists of these two important tissues. These are the exocrine and the endocrine tissues. The major function of the exocrine tissue is the production of the many digestive enzymes such as the amylase and the lipase. How about the endocrine tissue? Endocrine tissue includes the production of the glucagon and insulin hormones which are involved in the carbohydrate metabolism. Now, technically, pancreas is located behind the peritoneal cavity across the upper abdomen at about the level of the first and second lumbar vertebrae. As I mentioned, it consists of two morphologically and functionally different tissues such as the exocrine and endocrine. Endocrine is somewhat smaller than the exocrine, and endocrine consists of the islets of Langerhans cells which are or consist of islets of Langerhans which are well delineated and spherical or ovoidal clusters composed of at least 4 different cell types. And these islet cells secrete at least 4 different hormones as well. These include the glucagon, the insulin, the somatostatin, and the pancreatic polypeptide or abbreviated as PP or also termed as the F cells. So these are the different hormones that are involved in the regulation of carbohydrate metabolism. These are insulin, glucagon, epinephrine, the glucocorticoids, the growth hormone, the adrenocorticotropic hormone or ACTH, the thyroxine, and the somatostatin. One of the most important hormones that regulate the concentration of blood glucose is insulin. Insulin is considered as a primary hormone responsible for the entry of glucose into the cells. It is synthesized by the beta cells of islets of Langerhans in the pancreas. When these cells detect an increase in the blood glucose level, or what we call as the hyperglycemia, they release insulin. And the release of insulin causes an increased movement of glucose into the cells and increasing glucose metabolism. Insulin are released when glucose levels are high, and insulin are not released when glucose levels are decreased. Insulin also decreases the plasma glucose levels by increasing the transport of glucose entry into these muscles and adipose tissues by way of non-specific receptors. And it also increases these processes such as the glycogenesis, which is a conversion of glucose to glycogen for storage, the lipogenesis, which is a metabolic process by which the acetyl coenzyme A is converted to triglycerides for storage in fats, and also the glycolysis, which is a conversion of glucose to pyruvate. And insulin also inhibits glycogenolysis. Okay, and insulin has the function of decreasing the the concentration of blood glucose in the circulation. That is why it is referred as hypoglycemic agent. This is the example of the beta cell of the islets of Langerhans present in the pancreas. In beta cells, the main stimulus for the insulin to be released is the presence of elevated blood glucose level following after meal. Now, this is the glucose, the circulating blood glucose, which is taken up by this facilitative glucose transporter named as the GLUT2. Inside this beta cell of the islets of Langerhans of the pancreas, the glucose will undergo the metabolic pathway or the metabolic process named as the glycolysis. In glycolysis, the glucose will be converted to a product called as the pyruvate as well as the ATP. This ATP production will now alter the ATP-ADP ratio present in the cell, and that leads to the closure of the ATP-sensitive potassium channel, leading now to the depolarization of the membrane. This depolarization of the membrane will lead to the opening of the voltage-dependent calcium channel, which causes the increase of calcium concentrations and leading to the fission of the insulin secretory granules with the membrane, resulting to the release of its content. So this is how the insulin are released from the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas. In addition to that, we have here the CAMP, or what we call as the cyclic adenosine monophosphate, which is considered as a key in activating the signaling molecules, uh, as activating the signaling molecule in supporting insulin exocytosis from these beta cells of the islets of Langerhans. Aside from that, we have here the incretin, which is a hormone that also regulates the release of insulin from these beta cells. So moving on, we have another hormone that regulates the carbohydrate metabolism, and that is glucagon. Glucagon is produced or synthesized in the alpha cells of islets of Langerhans in the pancreas and is released during the stress and fasting states. When these cells detect a decrease in blood glucose level, they release glucagon. It also acts by increasing the plasma glucose level by glycogenolysis, or which is the conversion of glycogen to glucose for use, and also the gluconeogenesis, which is the conversion of non-carbohydrate sources to glucose in the liver primarily. This glucagon primarily increases the blood glucose level. That is the reason why glucagon is referred to as hyperglycemic effect or agent. Again, glucagon is referred to as hyperglycemic agent. We have another hormone here, and that is epinephrine. Adrenal glands consist of two major glands, and that consists of the adrenal medulla and the adrenal cortex. The adrenal medulla consists of the chromaffin cells, which is initiated by the flight or fight response, while the adrenal cortex consists of the three layers: the zona reticularis, the zona fasciculata, and the zona glomerulosa. And this adrenal cortex primarily responsible for the synthesis of the steroid hormones, or what we call as the corticosteroids. Going back to the epinephrine, as I mentioned, it is synthesized by the adrenal medulla, and adrenal medulla synthesize or produce what we call as the catecholamines. And these catecholamines include the epinephrine, or also called as adrenaline, norepinephrine, also termed as noradrenaline, and dopamine. Okay, so they are the stimulus that initiates the release of epinephrine is during the stress. So the actions of this epinephrine includes increasing the blood glucose level, also inhibits the insulin secretion, and also increase the process called as glycogenolysis, and promotes the lipolysis. Cortisol is synthesized from the adrenal cortex, specifically from the layer of zona fasciculata. And it is acted upon by the stimulation of the ACTH or the adrenocorticotropic hormone, which resulted to the increase of blood glucose level. One of the functions also of the cortisol is to decrease the entry of glucose into the cell. It also acts by increasing gluconeogenesis, liver glycogenolysis, and lipolysis. Cortisol is somewhat related or associated with the Cushing syndrome, which among the signs and symptoms of this disease is the presence of the moon phases, the buffalo hump, and also the fat is deposited in the body trunk. Cortisol is considered as the most important glucocorticoid that is produced from the adrenal cortex. We have another hormone, and that is the growth hormone, which is produced from the anterior pituitary gland. And its major function, or one of its functions, is the increase of blood glucose level in the circulation. It also decreases the entry of glucose into the cells and also acts by increasing the glycolysis. We have here the ACTH, or also termed as the adrenocorticotropic hormone, which is released from the anterior pituitary gland due to the decreased cortisol levels. It also stimulates cortisol release, thus increases the plasma glucose. So in short, the decreased levels of cortisol stimulate the anterior pituitary gland to release the ACTH. ACTH, in turn, stimulates the adrenal cortex to release cortisol and increases the plasma glucose levels by converting the liver glycogen to glucose, or what we call as the glycogenolysis, and promoting the gluconeogenesis as well. Thyroxine is synthesized or produced from the thyroid gland. As you can see, the thyroid gland consists of the follicular cells surrounded by the colloid. Thyroid is stimulated by the thyroid-stimulating hormone to release thyroxine that increases the plasma glucose levels by increasing these different processes. Increase the glycogenolysis, increase also the gluconeogenesis, as well as the intestinal absorption of glucose. By the way, the thyroxine is also termed as T4. We have another hormone that regulates the carbohydrate metabolism, and that is somatostatin. Somatostatin is synthesized in the delta cells of islets of Langerhans of the pancreas and the GI cells or D cells of the duodenum. Its actions include being an inhibitory hormone. That's the reason why the somatostatin is also called as the growth hormone inhibiting hormone, or GHIH. And the somatostatin inhibits the pancreatic secretion of these hormones such as the insulin, glucagon, as well as the other hormones such as the growth hormone and other endocrine hormones. Incretins are the last hormone that we will be discussing for the hormone regulation of carbohydrate metabolism. Incretins are gut hormones secreted by the enteroendocrine cells minutes after eating, and this consists of two types. We have the glucose-dependent insulinotropic peptide, or the GIP, as well as the glucagon-like peptide 1, or the GLP. Now, these incretins are considered as the group of metabolic hormones that stimulate a decrease in blood glucose levels. Incretins are released after eating and augment the secretion of insulin released from the pancreas of the beta cells of islets of Langerhans by the blood glucose dependent mechanism. We are through discussing the hormonal regulation of carbohydrate metabolism. So let's now proceed discussing the clinical applications of carbohydrates, particularly the different diseases associated with the blood glucose levels in the body. Before we start with the diseases associated with the carbohydrates, let's now first define the different terms that are involved in the clinical application of the carbohydrates. To start with, let's have the hyperglycemia. When you say hyperglycemia, that refers to increased or high levels of plasma glucose caused by an imbalance of hormones. We also have hypoglycemia that refers to decreased plasma glucose level and also the inborn errors of carbohydrate metabolism. And what do you mean by this? When you say inborn errors of carbohydrate metabolism, that refers to a group of rare genetic disorders in which the body cannot metabolize food component normally. This is also disorders that are usually caused by defects in the enzyme involved in the biochemical pathways that break down the essential biochemical components. So in this case, these are inborn errors of metabolism that affect the catabolism and anabolism of carbohydrates. A good example is the lactose intolerance. So on this slide, we have the different tests needed for the determination of the blood glucose level in the body. And on this column, it corresponds to the different specimen that is needed for the test to be done, and also the normal values which corresponds to the specific specimen extracted. And on this column, there is the conversion factor if you want to change or to convert the unit of milligrams per dl to millimoles per liter. So here are the different tests needed for the determination of the blood glucose level in the body, such as the fasting blood glucose, the oral glucose tolerance test, as well as the intravenous glucose tolerance test. Now, as you can see, in the glucose tolerance test, in our lab setup, it has a different blood extraction or time of blood extraction as stated on this slide, because in the actual setup, in our lab setup, we need to extract blood first for the determination of the fasting blood glucose level. Then after that blood extraction, the patient will be given a glucose load. Then another blood extraction will take place after an hour, then after 2 hours, then after 3 hours. So total, the glucose tolerance test, there will be 4 blood extractions needed for the most accurate determination of the blood glucose level in the body. This intravenous glucose tolerance test is a special test that aids in the evaluating the time to onset of diabetes, especially with patients with autoantibodies, and the value of the glucose is taken before and after the infusion of glucose. Diabetes mellitus is considered as one of the most significant diseases associated with the carbohydrate metabolism. It is a group of metabolic diseases sharing a common underlying feature of hyperglycemia, which refers to the increased blood glucose level due to defects of insulin secretion, insulin action, or both. We have here the categories of diabetes mellitus such as type 1 DM, type 2 DM, gestational DM, and also the other specific types of diabetes. In 1990 and 1979, the National Diabetes Data Group were able to categorize diabetes mellitus into 2 types. We have the type 1, or also termed as the insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus, and type 2, which is also termed as the non-insulin independent diabetes mellitus. But in 1995, the International Expert Committee on the Diagnosis and Classification of Diabetes mellitus was tasked by the American Diabetes Association, or also termed as ADA, to eliminate the older terms of diabetes mellitus. So instead of using the IDDM and NIDDM, better use now the type 1 and type 2 written in Arabic numerals. So these are the categories which are recommended by the ADA as well as the World Health Organization. So this type 1 DM has the following pathogenesis, which includes the beta cell destruction, absolute insulin deficiency, as well as autoantibodies. While the type 2 DM has the pathogenesis of insulin resistance with insulin secretory defect, as well as having the relative insulin deficiency. Now, for the gestational diabetes mellitus, the glucose intolerance during pregnancy due to metabolic and hormonal changes are the 2 most important pathogenesis under this category. While for the other specific types of diabetes, these include the associated with involving the or secondary conditions such as the genetic defect of beta cell functions, the pancreatic defect, the endocrine diseases, as well as the drug chemical induced. Actually, what I have mentioned in terms of the pathogenesis of the diabetes mellitus categories are written in your book. Did you know that type 3 diabetes mellitus is also referred as Alzheimer's disease? The Alzheimer gene that is present in this Alzheimer's disease seems to interfere with the brain cells' ability to use insulin, which make the cells to starve and die. And officially, it is called as type 3 diabetes. What it refers to is that their brain's insulin utilization or signaling is not functioning. But why it is related to Alzheimer's disease? Insulin acts like a key. Its job is to open the doors that allow glucose to enter the body cells from the bloodstream. Muscle cells can use glucose and fats to fuel its movement. However, for the brain cells, it relies fully on glucose to fuel its activities. And we all know that these activities that we are referring to include the decision making, the attention, the memory, the motor skills, as well as the speaking. Now, in type 3 diabetes mellitus, the brain cells called the neurons become starved of glucose, which in turn can lead to a progressive reduction in memory, reasoning, judgment, and insights that characterizes this Alzheimer's disease. Roughly, there is 20% glucose supply that is used to fuel the brain activities. In type 2 and type 3 diabetes mellitus, the body becomes less sensitive to insulin. It is like the locks and keys for the doors to the cells that are rusty and don't fit in as easily anymore. So, di ba, pag mag-rust na ang ating lock, mahirapan na tayo open that using the key. So, what we do is to add oil into it so that madali na lang siya buksan. Now, in this case, the result is that there is less glucose that is able to enter into the cells, which resulted to increase or high blood glucose levels in the bloodstream. So that's the reason why type 3 diabetes mellitus is considered also as the Alzheimer's disease. Diabetes mellitus is one of the leading causes of treated end-stage renal disease. When you say end-stage renal disease, it is also known as diabetic nephropathy or diabetic kidney disease. Now, this end-stage renal disease refers to the most advanced stage of kidney disease. How is DM related to or associated to ESRD or renal failure? Take note of this class that the DM is characterized by the high levels of glucose. Over time, the high levels of sugar in the blood damage the filtering units which is present within the kidney. So this eventually leads to kidney failure. Aside from that, diabetes mellitus is the most common cause of non-traumatic amputations. When there is non-traumatic, of course, there is traumatic. So let's define first the two. When you say traumatic, that refers to underlying cause that resulted in the need for an amputation. For example, during the motor vehicle accidents. How about the non-traumatic amputations? That refers to underlying diseases that is caused, for example, by the diabetes, artery disease, and even cancer. Aside from these definitions or informations, diabetes mellitus is also considered as the foremost cause of new blindness in adults ages 20 to 74 years old. So how does diabetes mellitus cause blindness or loss of vision? Blindness is related to diabetic retinopathy, which is the most common cause of vision loss for people of diabetes. Having high blood sugar level is not a direct cause of blindness, but it does so that there is a risk of developing serious eye conditions such as diabetic retinopathy, which over time can lead to permanent loss of insight. When you say diabetic neuropathy, okay, as in this case, one of the complications of diabetes mellitus Diabetic neuropathy is the type of nerve damage that can occur if you have diabetes. High blood sugar can injure nerves throughout your body, usually the legs and in the feet. So how does it result to diabetic neuropathy? Uncontrolled high blood sugar damages nerves and interfere with their ability to send signals, leading to diabetic neuropathy. Also, the high blood sugar levels weaken the walls of the blood vessels or the capillaries that supply the nerves with oxygen and nutrients of the body. Aside from that, we have the other complications of the diabetes mellitus, and that is the increased risk of developing atherosclerotic disease. Atherosclerosis is the hardening of the blood vessels. And also, the diabetes mellitus can cause coronary heart disease. That refers to the blockage in arteries that supply the blood to heart muscle. So how? Paano po makakos ng atherosclerotic disease ang DM? High blood sugar levels can damage blood vessels and the nerve that control your heart and the blood vessels. As simple as that. Here are the different classical signs and symptoms of diabetes mellitus. These are considered as the 3 Ps, such as the polydipsia, polyuria, and polyphagia. When we say polydipsia, that refers to excessive thirst. DM causes polydipsia because your blood sugar levels gets too high and make you feel thirsty, regardless of how much water you drink. Meanwhile, because your body is losing fluids, your brain tells you to drink more in order to replace them. This leads to the feeling of intense thirst. Polyuria refers to excessive urine production. When blood glucose level gets high, your kidneys produce more urine in an effort to remove the extra glucose from your body. The high blood sugar levels in the body will make you pee a lot. The more you pee, the more dehydrated and thirstier you get, the more you drink water, of course. The polyphagia refers to the increased food intake, and this polyphagia refers also to excessive hunger. In people with diabetes, glucose cannot enter cells to be used for the energy. This can be due to either low insulin level or insulin resistance. Because your body can convert this glucose for energy, you'll begin to feel very hungry. And eating more will just contribute to already high blood glucose levels, so that is very dangerous. Type 1 DM is one of the categories of diabetes mellitus. It is characterized by inappropriate hyperglycemia primarily as a result of pancreatic islet beta cell destruction and a tendency to ketoacidosis. When you say ketoacidosis, that refers to the buildup of acids in the blood. Now, without enough insulin, your body begins to break down fat as fuel. It produces a buildup of acids in the bloodstream called ketones, and these ketones eventually leading to diabetic ketoacidosis. Type 1 DM also refers to autoimmune destruction of beta cells that leads to absolute deficiency of insulin secretion. Aside from that, type 1 DM also refers to idiopathic type. When you say idiopathic type, that refers to diabetes that are not associated with autoantibodies, but insulin treatment is still required. And idiopathic type also refers to the cause is unknown. Type 1 DM is an abrupt onset. It is an insulin dependence that is the reason why it is formally known as insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. It has ketosis tendency and it is genetically related. This diagram shows the formation of ketone bodies, and the buildup of these ketones lead to the ketoacidosis. So when your cells don't get the glucose they need for energy, your body begins to burn fat for energy, which produces ketones. Ketones are chemicals that the body creates when it breaks down fat to use for energy. When these ketones build up in the blood, they make it more acidic. It means that they are a warning sign that your diabetes is out of control or that you are getting sick. So these are the different symptoms of diabetes: always tired, frequent urination, always hungry, sexual problems, sudden weight loss, wounds that won't heal, vaginal infections, numbed or tingling hands or feet, always thirsty, and blurry vision. Other signs and symptoms under type 1DM is rapid weight loss, hyperventilation, mental confusion, and possible loss of consciousness due to the increased glucose to brain. Type 2 DM is another category of diabetes mellitus. It is characterized by hyperglycemia as a result of individuals' resistance to insulin, also insulin secretory defect, which leads to a relative insulin deficiency. Type 2 DM constitutes the majority of diabetes cases. It is formally known as adult onset diabetes, long-term medical condition in which your body doesn't use insulin properly, resulting to unusual blood sugar levels. Aside from that, type 2 is not an autoimmune disease. It also refers to inappropriate high glucose production in the liver because the liver cannot sense the presence of the insulin. So even when the blood glucose is already high, the liver will continue to release more glucose, causing hyperglycemia or too much glucose in the blood. Aside from that, type 2 DM is also refers to the decrease of glucose transport in the cell. This type 2, as what I've mentioned, is the most common type among the categories of the diabetes mellitus. Most patients are obese. There is an increased percentage of body fat distribution in the abdominal region, and these are the following risk factors: overweight, sedentary lifestyle, family history of diabetes, advanced age, usually higher than 45 years old, and history of gestational diabetes mellitus or delivery before diabetes of a baby weighing more than 9 pounds. So in this slide, there is a classification between the type 1 DM and type 2 diabetes. I will leave this as your assignment, by the way. This slide simply shows the formation of C-peptide. C-peptide is a substance produced by the beta cells of the pancreas when proinsulin splits apart, and this leads to the formation of insulin and one molecule of C-peptide. Proinsulin is a prohormone precursor to insulin. And C-peptide is considered as a good tool to test whether you have type 1 diabetes or type 2 when your body doesn't use insulin as it is supposed to be. Now, this C-peptide doesn't actually affect the blood sugar, but your doctor can measure the level of it when they figure out how much insulin your body is making. So when you have high levels of C-peptide, it means that your body makes more insulin than the usual. Aside from that, when you have high levels of C-peptide, it only means that the body has insulin resistance and your body doesn't use the insulin as it is supposed to be. In addition to the definition of the C-peptide, C-peptide connects the alpha chain and the beta chain of the proinsulin. Here is the difference, the table that shows the difference among the type 1 diabetes, type 2 DM, and also the gestational diabetes mellitus. I will leave this as your reading assignment. Gestational diabetes mellitus is another category of DM. It refers to any degree of glucose intolerance with onset or first recognition during pregnancy, and usually this occurs during the second trimester or after 6 months of the pregnancy of the mother. This causes metabolic and hormonal changes. Take note of this class. Insulin do not cross the placenta, but the glucose can. Gestational diabetes mellitus is associated with increased perinatal complications and increased risk of development of diabetes in later years. When you say perinatal, that pertains to immediately before and after birth. Infants also have increased risk for respiratory distress syndrome. Too much insulin in a baby's system due to diabetes can delay surfactant production by the alveolar cells in the lungs, which is needed for the lung maturation of the infants. That's the reason that the infants who experience this respiratory distress syndrome can experience difficulty in breathing. Hypoglycemia is a condition that involves in the blood glucose level in the body. Now, it refers to or includes the insulin overdose. It refers to the excess insulin in the bloodstream causes cells in your body to absorb too much glucose from your blood. It also causes the liver to release less glucose that results to hypoglycemia or low glucose levels. The postprandial hypoglycemia, also called as the reactive hypoglycemia, refers to a blood sugar level that occurs after a meal, usually within 4 hours after eating. This is different from your blood sugar level that occurs while fasting. Usually after eating, the blood sugar rises. But in this disorder, in this disease, the blood sugar level is decreased to an abnormal level. And usually this is seen in individuals who have undergone a massive procedure to alter the digestive system of the individual, such as the gastric bypass surgery. We have also the fasting hypoglycemia, and that refers to insulin-producing pancreatic islet tumor or insulinomas. This also includes the hepatic dysfunction as well as the alcohol consumption. When you say insulinoma, that refers to a tumor of the pancreas that produces excessive amounts of insulin. When you say alcohol consumption, that refers to the, the heavy consumption of alcohol even without eating that can block your liver from releasing stored glucose into your bloodstream, causing hypoglycemia. Other specific types of diabetes mellitus are associated with certain conditions such as the secondary diabetes, and these include genetic defects of beta cells or insulinoma, pancreatic diseases, diseases of endocrine origin such as the Cushing's versus Addison's syndrome, drug or chemical-induced insulin receptor abnormalities, as well as the genetic syndromes. To define the Cushing's versus the Addison syndrome is the difference, and the only difference of these two is the presence of hormonal insufficiency of cortisol and aldosterone present in Addison's disease, whereas there is an excess of cortisol level in Cushing's syndrome. This is the classification of diabetes mellitus, which include type 1 DM, type 2 DM, other specific types with its corresponding diseases and conditions, as well as the gestational diabetes mellitus. And that ends my lecture for today about carbohydrates, its biochemistry, and its clinical applications. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned a lot. Once again, this is Ma'am Quaj, and I would like to end my lecture by reading a quote coming from Conrad Hilton, who was known as a businessman. Success seems to be connected to action. Successful people keep moving. They make mistakes, but they don't quit. Thank you. God bless and stay safe, everyone.